Hello, guys.
Andrew, can I borrow a little bit of your hair? I always laugh when I look at myself from this vantage point. It looks like I've got a mohawk. I need that little swoop in the front.
No, I just got my hair cut. So
I don't think I have any to spare, Murray. Borrow some from your sons.
Yeah, they've got plenty. Although I'm not sure for how long.
All right, just so everybody's aware, I'm turning on the video for the session. Oh, there's Linda. So whenever Richard is ready.
All right. So, Brian, before I begin, I just wondered if there's a way for us to see the participants. Is that what that is? We can click on them. There are 11.
Yeah, I was waiting for you to call the meeting to order. Then I would be glad to bring in, we have Ms. Gagnon, her attorney, Mr. Callahan, and her real estate agent, Ms. Kaeza.
All right, let's bring the meeting to order then. It is 5:34. We'll bring the special meeting of the South Kingstown Historic District Commission, Wednesday, April 28th, 2021, to order at 5:34. And we'll have a roll call. So Shantia Underhagen,
Here.
Andrew Martinez,
Here.
Linda Stedman,
Here.
Murray Gates,
Here.
Karen De Silva, absent, Richard Youngkin here. And also present is Brian Wagner, senior planner.
Yeah,
James Rabbit.
it
Planning
looks like
director.
he's dropped off. I do know that he's listening in from his car on his way to Connecticut.
Okay.
Whether or
and
not he listens or participates, it will depend.
we also have Andy Tights, a special legal counsel. Thank you all for attending. So the number 3 on our agenda is the approval of minutes for the April 5th, 2021 meeting. Do we have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
By
Second.
Mary Gates, second by Shanti. Is that correct?
I think Andrew
Yes,
and I
that's
did
what
it
I have.
together.
All right. I guess we should have a roll call on that. So Shanti Underhagen?
Are we roll calling to approve the motion?
Yeah, to approve.
Yeah, aye.
Murray Gates,
Aye.
Linda Stedman,
Aye.
and Andrew Martinez,
Aye.
Richard Youngkin, aye. So we have approval. So having no old business, we'll skip to number 5, new business.
And would you like me to bring in the
Yes, why don't we
applicants?
bring them in.
All right. All right, all of our attendees for the applicants, Ms. Gagnon, Mr. Callahan, Ms. Kaeza, if you want to unmute yourselves, you are all live.
Very good. Thank you all for attending. I can see you all now on the screen. And do we have Ann with us as well?
Yes, you do.
Thank you, Ann. It's good to see you. All right. So what I'll do is I think we're all very familiar with what is before us. Excuse me. Get rid of this. I'll read the application. So we divided this into 2 parts. And thank you very much for doing that, Catherine. I think it makes things simple. So the first is 5A, application for certificate of appropriateness. And we're going to call this just COA1, just so we keep it straight for the minutes. 2545 Kingstown Road, Assessor's Plat 23-3, Lot 43. Discussion and possible action on an application which we received to modify provisions of the April 6, 2011 Certificate of Appropriateness pertaining to a roof balustrade and entry sidelight windows. And there were supporting materials as part of the agenda that you could pick up on the town's website. And I won't read those, but they're listed here. Hope you all have been able to look at those documents. So with that, I think, we discussed this, it's in our minutes. We had this previous meeting and we were not able to hear from Catherine completely. And so I think what I'd like to do is have Catherine present what she'd like to present at this point about this particular one. And you'll have the opportunity to do the second one when we get to that as well, Catherine. So if you want to keep your comments just to this certificate of appropriateness, COA1, that would be fine. And, and take it from there.
Are you asking me to read through the application as it is, highlight the major points, or are we just going to simply assume everyone read it and move on to a resolution? I'm not
Well,
sure what you would like.
I think that's a good question. We can assume that everybody read it, but I think in that introduction, I want to point out that the application is specific about modifying the 2011 decision. We just want to keep that for the record clear. But, I think we do have the application before us. I don't think you need to read that. I think you could just go right into what you'd like to do.
Well, as the application indicated, we are basically asking, as it is known and has been known for some time to the HDC, that the balustrade was in significant disrepair, and upon removal of it back in 2012, in order for us to do a complete roof replacement of the house, it literally came down in pieces. That we did preserve one section of it in order to have access to the design of it. But then that section was significantly damaged in several flooding incidents in the basement of the home. And it was completely non-salvageable at that point and was disposed of. That was sometime in 2014, I believe. And so we are asking that the historic district simply allow us to, we are not in a position to replace it. We're not in a position for multiple reasons. The cost prohibitive nature of having such a structure recreated. It was also not complete when we bought the property. It was only on 3 sides of the property. And we have evidence that there were many years when there was no balustrade at this property. So we do not believe that actually what was on the roof was original. It was likely some sort of a replacement at some point in time, but we do have photographic evidence that it was not there for a good portion of the early 1900s. We do not have evidence of when it was replaced per se. Secondly, the roofing companies that came out to assess the situation when we had to have the roof replaced had indicated that in order to appropriately attach a decorative structure of that nature, that it would involve the driving of 4x4 posts from the attic floor through the roof at an interval of every 8 to 10 feet. And that reduces the life of the roof by 1/2 to 2/3 potentially. It's a 30-year roof that we put on the property at a total cost of $22,000, which was an unexpected expense. At that time, it was a necessity in order to protect the substantial investment we had made to the interior renovation of the home. And again, it was indicated throughout to the town planning, zoning, and historic district commission that the funds that would be used to work on the property would have been profit funds from the bed and breakfast. The bed and breakfast was closed in December of 2019. There are no funds from the bed and breakfast in order to invest in a project of that nature at this juncture. Basically, we ended with, not very much in the bank at the end of the run of the bed and breakfast. And on top of that, we had never personally taken salaries for running the bed and breakfast. We simply reinvested into the business itself and or improvements to the home, interior and exterior, with those funds. But it was never a situation where we had an abundance of those funds to do a project of such a decorative nature. The second piece, it has to do with the sidelights. I understand that the historic district is upset because you feel that in the removal of the balustrade to do the roof project, and that in the removal of the broken leaded sidelights at the front entrance, that was in some way our starting of a project. Whereas really they were necessities in order to replace the roof because you couldn't do that with the balustrade still up there. And also we were running a bed and breakfast that was open to the public here. And the side lights were in a complete state of disrepair. The glass was broken, the leading was broken, the leading had begun to oxidize. Those oxidized particles can become airborne with any significant vibration. So the vibration from the road itself, as well as the opening and closing of the front door, would cause additional vibration. That material is toxic, and it was in a state of complete disrepair. The previous owners of the home had put a plexiglass panel. They had screwed in a plexiglass panel on the exterior of the building in order to prevent birds from flying through the broken glass. It was also not retaining any heat whatsoever. So in order to remove potentially toxic material, and in order to improve heat retention at the main door of the bed and breakfast and of the home, we did in fact remove it. And again, I understand that your point of view on this is because we removed it, we started that project. Again, because we never had a substantial amount of additional funds to work on decorative projects here at the home. There were never any bed and breakfast profits that could be reasonably directed to an effort to reinstall or restore the material that was there. As the proposal indicated, we are willing to work with a local stained glass artist, and I provided 2 proposals, who are in a position to recreate, based on the design, the original design, a hanging piece of glass that basically mimics the design of the original windows, but with non-toxic modern material. They are in a position to attempt to reuse the medallions that were attached, that are attached still to the framework, if they determine that those materials are not toxic and that they can work with those materials. If they cannot, they actually have sourced, in both instances, basically a replacement that looks the same, but is made with safe material that they are comfortable working with. We are in a position to make an investment of under $1,000 to have those 2 panels constructed and installed, and to do that prior to the sale of the property. We are proposing to leave the front window setup as is, with an exterior glass storm, an interior plain glass window, and these 2 stained glass inserts would be installed as a hanging piece in between the 2. There is 1.5 inches of gap between the 2. We have never had a condensation issue between those 2, which was the first question I encountered by both glass makers, because if there was a condensation problem, that would not have been an ideal situation in which to install this newly proposed glass panel. But because there is no condensation, it is safe to do so. So they do have the original designs that we had created way back when by New England Stained Glass, and they would basically mimic that design, which was the original design, but using, again, modern safe material at a more cost-effective price point, that we are willing to make that investment in order to resolve the situation.
All right, is there anything more you'd like to add to that? That's it. Okay, I think one of the things that we need to do is look at these two items one at a time and not together. And first, I think we need to make, which is part of our standards and guidelines, we need to make a finding of character defining, whether or not the balustrade is a character defining feature of the house, and when was it a character defining feature. So I did a little research. I hope other members of the commission did their research. But my conclusion is that the balustrade is likely to have been an original feature of the house. There are two other houses with significant balustrades. They're all architecturally a little different in the village and of Kingston. And in looking at similar buildings throughout the state of Rhode Island of this period, there are a number that were recorded in 1936 by the Historic American Building Survey that had balustrades of this nature, federal style houses built in the 1820s that had these balustrades. So my feeling is that what happened was that the balustrade was in existence through the 19th century. We have a photograph of it circa 1900, which shows it intact. We do have photographs of it later. By 1939, it was not there. Now, we did experience quite a horrific hurricane in 1938 that could have damaged it. We don't know for sure. It doesn't show up in 1954 in our record, our historical photographic record, but we do know that it is there in 1983 when the state of Rhode Island did a pretty extensive historic resources survey of Kingston Village, and they photographed it. They also at that time, in their write-up about Kingston, mentioned these three federal style balustrades and how character defining they were, how significant they were. They're mentioned in the report. And we do know that aerial photographs show the entire, well, three sides of the house with the balustrade in 2010. The fourth side, which faces north, just shows the mounting brackets for the fourth side of the balustrade. It's missing. So I think you're right, Catherine. By the time you got it, it may be that you only had part of the balustrade in your possession at that time, 2011. We do know that your photographs for the application in 2011 show the balustrade in place. So I think my feeling is that it's character defining. I'd like to hear from the other board members on this. And we'll start with anybody who raises their hand, wants to start off.
Go.
Shanti?
Rich, yeah, I agree with you. I did not do as extensive study of it, but certainly in my experience with not only Rhode Island architecture, but New England architecture, this is not an unusual feature to see for building of this age. So I think you've captured precisely why it is in fact a character defining.
Yeah, this is Murray. I too had gone to the South Kingstown Architectural Survey, published in 1984, most recently. And my understanding is that when properties are listed on the National Historic Register, you have to choose a point in time. So yes, properties and structures do change over time, but for listing on the register, you choose a particular point in time and what that house and structure looked like at that particular point in time. So what was recorded in 1984 does include, as Rich had alluded to, a parapet. I could read the actual writing here, but it's essentially referring to the structure on the roof.
Does anybody else want to say anything? Andrew, you have anything to say?
Thank you for your research, Rich. I mean, it seems pretty thorough. And in looking at the house with and without it, I do have to say with it, it is truly character defining, and it's a noticeable omission not to have it there. And, you know, I guess I'd also like to say, while I appreciate financial hardship and inconveniences, I have to say this doesn't um, excuse one from neglecting the obligations of living in the district and the codes associated with it, or um, give one freedom to make arbitrary decisions that have already been run by and vetted by the commission. To me, it's the equivalent of I have transmission problems that I wasn't banking on. I'm not going to register my car this year with the DMV. I can't make that decision. I can't make that arbitrary. I still have an obligation to follow through on that. So I'm having trouble, with the reasoning behind making decisions or not making decisions or not following through. It just seems to be based on convenience or funds. And these, again, were decisions that were vetted through the Historic District Commission in the past, almost a decade ago. And now that seems to be easy to ignore them due to lack of funds or convenience. So I would, although I'm, you know, mindful and want to find a way to make things happen, I also feel that we need to draw a line and our expectations that we have for all homeowners within the district. So
In 2012, we were approved by the Historic District Commission to replace our roof. They understood at that time, that panel, that it was necessary to remove the balustrade in order to replace the roof. The roof was a substantial, unexpected financial commitment that we had no choice but to make. It was something that we did run by the entire panel, and it was approved. We obtained a certificate of appropriateness for the replacement of the roof with the understanding that in order to replace the roof, the balustrade had to come down. And that was done in 2012.
Catherine, that's correct, but I want to proceed with a process here. I want to determine that it is character defining. We have to do that first to apply our standards and guidelines and to move on with this process. I think the consensus among the board that I'm hearing is that it was a character defining feature. As such, it follows into our standards and guidelines under number 3, A through D, which describe how character defining features must be dealt with. So they really should be preserved at all, well, within reason. Now, we also have within our guidelines and within the enabling law and within our zoning that we must be reasonable about this. So I need to express to you that there is a reasonableness that we must carry forward. I think Brian has reminded of us of that. And also, if you think about the demolition provisions in our historic zoning, we talk about working with, if it's a demolition, which I believe actually a removal of a feature of this significance is actually a demolition.
These guidelines were from 2013, however, that you're referencing right now, and this all occurred in 2012. We were not provided any of this information at that time.
Our guidelines that we followed back then, prior to the publication of our new guidelines, were in accord with the Secretary of Interior standards, and they followed basically the same as what we are following now. This is just an elaboration, more detailed version of what they were following. So we actually are very consistent in the following of our guidelines from, basically back then until now. We are basically operating under the same set. We just elaborated them a little bit more, gave more direction or more detail. But the 10 standards of rehabilitation still apply that are under the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation.
But we were not aware of those at that time. And moreover, to explain a little bit more, when we had no choice but to have the roof repaired because it was about to destroy everything we had done in the interior of the house. It was that bad. And we were not aware of that when we bought the house, that when this piece of decorative work was taken down, it apparently had been put up there in a way that we should have known as new owners. Someone should have told us that when you had to take this down, it was going to completely fall apart. But no one said anything about that. So we were not given a certain amount of information that would have been very significant for homeowners of a historic house. The people who owned the house before us did not do their due diligence in telling us any of this. And we were about to lose all of the work we had done. That was significant. So we made a choice to spend $22,000 on a new roof. And when we did that, the decorative portion of the house, of this roofing, absolutely fell apart in their hands. We watched it happen in absolute horror, but we watched it happen. And we had no idea what to do from that point on.
And we were not
Well, I
given
think
guidance at the meeting to approve the roof either, that there should be some measures taken for demolition, et cetera. We weren't provided with that guidance by the HDC.
Well, I think if you had, I don't want to repeat what happened with you in history, but in terms of what we're going forward, what we can do is we can evaluate how much of a hardship this is for you, and we can talk about what the cost of replacing that balustrade is. That's the reasonableness part of our zoning, okay? And that falls into the demolition provisions that I just cited. It gives us an ability to talk about that.
Mhm.
But what we would need from you is the cost of that balustrade replacement. Now, going back, I want to say this, going back to the 2011 decision, that board at that time, that HTC at that time, gave you an unlimited number of years. They knew at that time this might be a big deal for you to replace that balustrade, but they wanted you to do it, and you actually put in your plan that you would do it. So, and that's what they approved. So they gave you time, and time is money, time to accumulate funds to do such a job. And I think that's what they were aiming for. They also gave you that for the sidelights, knowing that that might be expensive too. So it was a reasonable approach in 2011 to restore. They knew you had to take this balustrade down to fix it, to replicate it, to do whatever needed to be done. They knew, as you said, that when you had to replace the roof, you needed to take it off there to put the roof on. But they also knew that you had said you would like to, you wanted to, you agreed to put the balustrade back up when you were ready to do so. And now, I mean, that still holds true, basically, Catherine and Ann. That holds true of this moment. That certificate of appropriateness is in place. You have that option. And we can reaffirm that option to give you the grace of time. If that's not satisfactory to you, which it doesn't appear it is, then we need to have more information about the why. What is the cost that's the burden? And do you have that information?
There are no funds. If in advance of this meeting, I had known that that was going to be an expectation to have workers and roofers come out here and provide those quotes, I would have done that. But I was not expecting this turn in the conversation. Again,
it's my opinion. It's the board hasn't shared that.
Okay, so I would have done that at this time. I'm not even sure where to start in terms of a contractor who A, would be willing to get up on that roof, B, to reconstruct based on the photos that we can provide, C, the roofing costs, and also the fact that we're still dealing with the potential reduction in the life of the roof because of having to put a hole every 8 to 10 feet. The home is under contract. The home is under contract in such a way that I don't also know that the potential buyers are going to be okay with us doing that, because they know that a new roof was put on the home back in 2012 with the likely expectation that that roof is going to hold secure for the average life of its type of roof, or 30 years. So those are all concerns. I'm not even sure where to begin. And once again, I'm telling you that there are no funds. There are no funds left from the business, which was the main source of the majority of funds to do these kinds of projects. Literally, the bank accounts were closed in December of 2019 with about $1,000 in them. And that is a primary concern. Yes, we are selling the home, but with a very limited profit margin that has already been dedicated to the purchase of a new home. And those are personal funds. We purchased the home with personal funds with the intention that when we would sell the home, the business would not have any connection with the sale of the home. And the personal funds that we invested would at some level be returned. So
Ashanti has a question.
Yeah,
Excuse me.
I would like us to not have to go through this type of explanation for every agenda item on this COB. It's an owner's responsibility, irrespective of ownership and use, take care of buildings within the district. So I think this explanation about the business money versus personal money is irrelevant. I would appreciate it if we could set that aside. If these owners have some way of confirming that this is an actual financial hardship, then as you proposed, we should investigate that. But the difference between a business account and a home, all the owners in this district are responsible for maintaining their building financially. We don't care about the source of those funds.
Anybody else want to add to that? Yes, Brian?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, a couple of things that I think need to be stated at this point. As Ms. Anderhagen mentioned, the responsibility to maintain this structure is in no way connected to the success or a lack thereof of the business that was being operated there. It is a responsibility that they undertook when they purchased the building. I understand, and I'm sorry that maybe the previous owner was not particularly forthright in problems with the structure, but the responsibility to do due diligence in a purchase is on the buyer, not necessarily the seller. So long as the seller complies with legal requirements for disclosure, it's caveat emptor. There have been substantial funds invested in this structure. I believe Ms. Gagnon testified previously that they had invested some $50,000 or $60,000 in interior modifications to the structure. That was a choice in how they spent money. They did not prioritize historic rehabilitation in that expenditure. And between 2017 and 2020, they invested another $16,000 in air conditioning. Again, funds that were not prioritized to the responsibilities that they agreed to in 2011 in terms of doing historic rehab work. I did not include the documents from 2011 or 2014 with the COA in this case, because frankly, I thought we were beyond the point of arguing what was required by what was represented in the applications and what was required by those approvals. Very clearly, the balustrade and glass were proposed to be removed, repaired, and replaced on the structure. And that's what the certificate of appropriateness was awarded for. And they are now asking to change those provisions so that those things do not have to be returned to the structure. And that's what you're deciding on. If Ms. Gagnon has for a while been making a hardship case in terms of finances, if that is something that the board does in fact wish to consider, then I think we are going to need to see certain financial disclosures from the owners. And we are also going to need an explanation as to why the house can't be sold with an order requiring future owner to finish the repairs at their own expense. And that's where I limit my comments on the hardship issue.
Thank you, Brian. Do we have any other members of the commission that want to speak to this? Okay, so not here.
I believe that Norma Kayatsa has something to say.
Regarding the sale. I don't know if you.
Yes,
Yeah,
Norma.
if I could speak. Obviously, I don't own a historic home and am not familiar with historic district commission and regulations. However, I can attest that this has created a hardship in this whole situation, in that we are selling a home that clearly Ms. Gagnon and Ms. Danis felt they took care of in an impeccable manner. And yes, the balustrade was falling apart, so they repaired the roof to keep the integrity of the entire home, and were not able to replace it. And at no time were they aware that this was going to culminate in this problem. And now we're at the 9th hour here, where Catherine has gone above and beyond to try to find ways that can correct the issues that are financially feasible and can be done in time to sell the home. But I believe that the situation with the balustrade, between the cost and the time, is going to be a huge hardship, not just financially. And I feel that there is rarely going to be an owner that is going to be willing to take on the onus of a previous historic commission's decision, of which they knew nothing about. And clearly, I believe Catherine and Anne were not aware, when they fulfilled that certificate of appropriateness, that a rotted balustrade would have to be done financially. And honestly, I believe that getting someone out there to get a pricing of a balustrade could have been done a couple of weeks ago had someone known about it. But now we're talking about, again, delaying again. And it seems to me like all the cards were not put on the table fairly so that they could make appropriate. Obviously, Catherine got paperwork in immediately after the last meeting so that this could move forward quickly. And had we known that that needed to be done, it would have been. So I feel that that needs to be taken into consideration as well as you discuss the financial obligations of this requirement. But also,
Mr. Chair, this is Brian. First of all, with all due respect to Ms. Kaya's profession as a real estate agent, I don't think her speculation regarding hardship and expense is pertinent here. With respect to her statements that the owners were unaware of their responsibilities, I think that is just flat incorrect. The documentation from 2011 very clearly indicates what their responsibilities were, and the standards and guidelines very clearly indicate what their responsibilities were. I think we need to move away from understand what the requirements were and accept that those were requirements, and move on to the question of whether or not this board wants to alter the provisions of those original requirements. And I also noticed for the chair that Planning Director Rabbit has his hand raised.
uh, Jamie, do you want to say something now? Jamie Rabbit?
Unmuting. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just wanted to echo Brian Wagner's comments, and also listening to testimony about this economic hardship, including the realtor who said it's an economic hardship and cost prohibited. Yet there's been no evidence of what the cost to replace the balustrade is. The only evidence was submitted with an older cost estimate with regards to the side lights, which was $3,000, I believe. And to Brian's point, substantial investments have been made in this property in other manners. So choices were made to not move forward with certain aspects of the historic restoration and spend funds in other manners. And to both your point as well as staff's point, the financial standing of a business has to me no relationship to the viability of a valid historic certificate that was issued in 2011, that the applicant was fully aware of their responsibilities with regards to replacement and adhering to those requests that they made, and gave certainty to the commission that they would undertake those at a point in time. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Shanti, you had something to say?
Yeah, Rich, well, I was going to follow up on your, I think your comment or Brian's comment about moving on to consider whether we want to keep the certificate of appropriateness intact or grant the applicant's request to alter that C of A. Is that where we are at this moment in this meeting?
I think we are at the point where we've decided that the economic hardship has limits, that we would need to see more detail about the cost of the balustrade to pursue that avenue. I think we also are in agreement that the applicants had we have to understand that it's been 10 years since 2011. The applicants have been the same owners of the house for that period of time. They must have understood that they were under this obligation all that time, that the sale of the house is their choice, is their self-imposed hardship on this. We all know that the C of A runs with the land. We discussed that on April 5th, that it can be passed to the new owners, that the obligation can be passed to the new owners, that it does not sunset. And that is what is in the 2011 C of A, and we can leave it. We can not modify that C of A if we choose. And I think we need to let Catherine say something before we go forward on a motion. I think I want to take these motion by motion too, to keep everything straight. So
if I could just make 2 quick points. A couple of you have mentioned that we made choices in what we were going to spend money on, kind of intimating that we chose not to spend money on these exterior features of the home. I want to just kind of clarify that the funds that were spent on the following the initial purchase of the house were basically to make the home livable. The interior of the home matters as well. And because we personally would be residing in the home long-term and running a business in this space, the interior of the home had to meet basic standards for having the business here and for our own safety, our own personal safety, including the addition of the heating and air conditioning units in 2017 and 2020. And that directly has to do with health and welfare of the people living in this home. This home is very difficult to heat. And by doing it through the 2-pipe steam system that we do have and that we had to replace, we hoped that having the more energy efficient system fired by gas instead of oil would make some improvements. It made some improvements. It still is a very difficult home to heat and to cool. And so the addition of those air conditioning units and the choice to spend the money on those had to also do with the livability of the home, because the interior matters too. Anybody who's seen the interior of our home knows that we are relatively frugal in the decisions that we make. We are not just throwing money at interior projects to make the inside look great and ignoring the outside. We have done as much as we have been able to afford to do on the exterior. These are two projects that I'm going to attest to the fact that we were not under, we 2011 application burden us to complete the projects. I'm an individual for whom part of my living is writing grants, and I write grants all the time. And in those grant proposals, it's always the pie in the sky proposal of what I want to do and how much money I need to do it. And when a grantor comes back at me with a reduced amount of money, there is the understanding that that project is going to have to be modified. That's where I was coming from in the completion of that proposal. At no time did we ever receive a packet of information as thorough as this 2013 guideline that was provided to us in 2013 back in 2011.
Mhm.
We were not aware that by including these items in that proposal, because it was the urging of the planning department at the time that we put in several projects that we wanted to try to accomplish over a period of time in that proposal.
Catherine, I don't think we want to go back there. That is pretty well registered, that C of A and what it says and what it obligates the commission to and you to. So that
That's
if you
well
had
and
it,
good, but that doesn't make it clear what we understood as a result, because we did not have these materials at the time. You have to understand that we never owned property like this before. We did the very best we could to try to define what would make things reasonable in this house, not only for us to live in, but to try to preserve what was here. There wasn't much. What was inside this house was extraordinarily difficult to deal with. Never mind what was outside the house. So we had to make some very difficult and expensive choices, just so you know. Maybe you don't know what was in here.
I don't
Quite
know, but
something.
I realize, and that you could have come to the commission back then and described what the problem was. Shanti had a
We didn't
point.
know that.
I just wanted to say,
We
you know,
didn't know that.
this is a local, well, you came to the commission at some point, so you knew it existed. This is a local law. It was enacted in 1959. The communities revised its to track with current practice and state enabling law. The guidelines have been revised over time. It's an established mechanism in this community. And I think, again, like the issue of hardship and business versus personal funds, we can't rehash this issue on every item of this of both of these certificates of appropriateness. This is established. This has been intact for over 50 years. And to say you didn't understand or you didn't know, at this point, it's just not fair to this commission. This is a well-established local law. You know, I think we need to move along and go through point by point at this juncture.
Richard, this is Matt Callahan. Can I just make a couple of brief comments?
Yes.
With respect to the applications this evening, again, the decision had not been made, as I understand it, that this was a significant architectural feature at the last meeting. And Ann and Catherine had presented some information which indicated that the balustrade had not been on the building for significant periods of time. And I think they were under the impression that it had been added perhaps in the 20th century, not certainly almost 200 years ago. So if the commission has made that decision tonight that it is a significant architectural feature, then we do have to move to the next point. But we didn't think that was a given coming into the meeting. But the next point would be this issue of demolition of a significantly historical feature and how that should be addressed. And it's not just the expense of the balustrade, which will be significant, but as Catherine has indicated, the restoring that balustrade in the proper manner is going to be having a real effect upon the integrity of the roof, not just when it's being installed in the future. And so that's an additional expense which will have to be taken, I think, should have to be taken into consideration now that the commission has, I assume, made the decision that this is a historically significant feature of the house.
What we need to do on each level is to ascertain whether we are dealing with historically significant character defining features. That's part of what we do. And in terms of this application, if you want to go down the pathway of a demolition, then there are, as you've probably read in the zoning and also in our guidelines, there's a separate section on how to evaluate demolitions. But we need to know, if we go down that pathway, first of all, what the cost is, what we're dealing with in terms of the cost. So Brian, you had a point?
Yeah, I was just going to add that as with the issues being raised as to financial hardship, if we don't have evidence of the owner's present financial means, and we don't have evidence of what the actual cost of recreating the architectural feature is, we can't make a decision on hardship. Similarly, in terms of whether or not the balustrade can be restored without having a negative impact on the structure, we would also need to know whether that's the case through evidence from carpenters, builders with experience working on historical structures as to whether or not a feature like this can be restored to a roof without having an unreasonable impact on the integrity of that roof. I would have to believe that this is not the first time rooftop structures have been addressed in that question. If the owners want to come forward with a craftsman who is experienced in dealing with these sorts of issues to testify that, yeah, this is an unreasonable threat to the overall structure, then fine. I think the board should consider that, and I think that's an important factor. But without that, just having the property owner speculate that in fact is the case, I think is something the board should be warned against.
I would agree with that as well. There are other options too with the balustrade itself. The materials that it's made out of. Our standards and guidelines talk about alternative materials, synthetic materials that could be used for that. That it doesn't have to have the weight of the original balustrade in terms of heavy wood structural materials. It can be fashioned out of alternative materials that will weather, that won't rot, like fiberglass or AZEK or other synthetic materials. And that's definitely an option for you. There are other options too in terms of how much of the balustrade you put back up, if that's where we go. Do you put up just the front of the balustrade and not the other sections of it, the other 3 sections that existed? So I think that what happens under demolition, if we go there, if you choose that route, there are a whole lot of criteria that are laid out where we begin to negotiate with you about how much is done. There are words such as working together. We come up with a plan to restore that character defining feature in some form. So if the board wishes to go this way, and if the applicants wish to go this way, that is on the table. If you do not wish to go that way, then the board may make another decision. I'm leaving it really in that position right now, because I think the board and you need to tell us what you'd like to do as applicants.
I think we'd like to think about perhaps putting the front up in a synthetic material,
But
if it's
only,
possible,
only if we can afford to do so.
if we can afford it.
And we don't have the resources to even source a contractor at this
Right.
juncture. I don't know who we would contact, and it's a big if. I mean,
All right.
synthetic
big
materials
if.
also cost a lot of money.
Right. All right, Shanti, do you have something to say?
I'd like to make a comment and a suggestion. I have extensive experience with historic houses and real estate, far more, I think, than your realtor and than you. This is not a particularly difficult nut to crack on some level. You know, you have a number of outstanding issues with your local historic district, which are coming to light, which you have said are interfering to some extent with your sale. Any prospective buyer should be able to bring in contractors to figure out what the cost of remedying this situation is on their own. And then you need to think about how much you're willing to take off your sale price for that, to get rid of this problem. I mean, that's one way to deal with this. I'm not making any judgment about your financials, because that's not what we're here for. But I have seen that type of thing done repeatedly in these types of situations. So there is that option where you don't have to solve this problem beyond some negotiations with a prospective buyer who may be willing to undertake and remedy this situation on their own. So that is an option that you have.
Right. Are there any other thoughts from the board about this? Hearing none. Do we have a motion? Can I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, before we move on to a motion, what are you requesting a motion on? Because we have not yet discussed the side lights, and if you wanted to get your same finding of character for that, you should have that discussion. Or make it clear that you're only voting on the balustrade.
I think I want a motion. I want to take these one at a time, and if time permits, and let's deal with the balustrade itself and get that done. So we have options here. We can go down the pathway of the demolition and negotiate out. I think the applicants are thinking in those terms. We can have we can go back to the 2011 decision and reaffirm it. We can have an alternative decision. But I think we need to move on.
I do have one question, Rich, and that has to do with timelines. So should there be some constraints around timelines, regardless of the parties that are going to be carrying out the implementation of the project?
Yes, there should be, I think, moving forward. I think Brian may have one, may have a.
Yeah, just to point out, when the application that was submitted in 2011, there wasn't any predetermined timeline for completion of performance. Our current application for a certificate of appropriateness includes a 1-year deadline for completion of all approved work. It's right in the application that's filed. So if you were to do, if you were to render a decision on this certificate of appropriateness, there would be a 1-year deadline to complete the work unless you specified something else, as you did at the last meeting due to the materials issues with respect to new construction.
Right. I think we should also find out if there's anybody in the public who wants to speak on this.
We do have one attendee. If that person wishes to say something or participate, they could raise their hand and they will be recognized.
Thanks.
I am not seeing a hand.
All right, then I think we are able to move on with this balustrade motion. Anybody want to? Shanti, do you want to make a motion?
Yep. Upon review of the application materials and in consideration of the testimony received during the public hearing on April 28th, 2021, the South Kingstown Historic District Commission hereby renders the following decision on the owner's application for a C of A to modify the provisions of the HDC's April 6, 2011 COA as follows. I would propose the applicant's request to permanently remove the roof balustrade is denied. The balustrade is a significant architectural feature of the structure, contributes to the character of the historic district, Kingston Historic District. The findings of the materials reviewed are documents 1 through 14, and the approval, the denial is based on the following findings of fact. Items 1 through 5 findings of fact. Do I need to read those, Brian?
No, you don't.
Okay.
I mean, you can just adopt the findings of fact as set forth in the staff, the
Okay.
project review
We-
memo, if you like.
We do want to make
Some
sure.
are not applicable to the balustrade.
Right,
Yeah,
right. So,
Shanti, wait a minute. We do want to make sure that the character defining feature is part of the findings of fact. I think you've already said that in the motion.
I'm going, well, I'd like to modify this to say the findings of fact 1 through 4 as submitted in the staff report. And further, that if approved as requested, the proposed modifications to the 2011 certificate of appropriateness. Excuse me, I would not do item 5. I would add that the balustrade is likely an original feature that based on photographs and the State Historic Preservation Report and the National Register nomination, that the balustrade has been in place for a significant period of time, irrespective of time that it was taken off. And I would add findings of fact 8 through 10. The conditions of approval, I would say, are A through, a little bit confusing, but as contained in the staff report, A through G.
Well, you don't really need any conditions of approval here.
Well, we don't.
Shanti, since you're not approving any work. You're saying.
How are we conditioning the timeline then? And I want to add something about materials. And
Shanti, this is a denial. Your motion is for denying the.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I got too much material.
I think it's important to cite that the standards on denial, which are 3, A through D. I think it is.
Excuse me, but this is why we end up with the situation we have. We have no idea what you're talking about
We have
right
no idea
now.
what you're referring to.
What you're referring
what
to.
standards and.
Well, we're referring to the standards and guidelines booklet that you have a copy of, which
Okay.
is the handbook, all right? And then we're also referring to the staff report, which is a draft.
On
It's
page.
comments, and do you have that? It's
No.
it was on the website for the town. It was part of the agenda items on the website. And it's a staff report that itemizes the situation and also conditions for a denial or approval. And it's several pages long, and you can find it on the agenda site. It says COA. I think it's referenced as a project review memo.
We were provided with an agenda HDC 2021-428 and minutes from your last meeting.
Period.
Yeah, but if you go to the website to see all the materials there, have you been to the town website?
We were not aware that we were supposed to go to the website. There were
Exactly.
no instructions for that.
Rich, I'd like to I want to modify my motion a little bit. If we can just back up for a second, maybe while the applicants are trying to track this down. The motion that I intended to make was a denial of wholesale demolition, but I see that we have the option of a denied subject to further study, which I think is the motion that I would prefer to make.
Is that what you'd like to make? Okay.
So it's alternate 3, and I'll read it. The balustrade is a significant architectural feature of the structure that contributes to the character of the Kingston Historic District and is worthy of preservation. However, the HDC will entertain further input from experts in the field of preservation and restoration of historic structures on the subject of whether the balustrade can be reinstalled on the structure without unreasonable risk for the long-term preservation of the structure. That was my intention. Offer the opportunity for perhaps a change of materials.
All right. And this, now, is the rest of the commission following this? Do we have a second for this motion?
Second.
Andrew seconds. Do we have any further discussion?
Yeah, so I'm trying to understand how this fits into the sale of the house. So is there anything that, how do we ensure that either the applicant today or the owner tomorrow is aware of these obligations?
I think that what we're doing now, based upon sort of past procedure and current needs, is that we're recording these decisions. So they will be recorded in land evidence, and then they will run with the land.
Yeah, the decision will be recorded, so it will be there in the land evidence records, and any prospective purchaser will be completely aware of it. I think I'd like to hear from Andy. Does this motion need to include a requirement that the balustrade be put back up if that is the board's intent?
I think by your denial of the request to, which they've made to change it, it is required to be put back up, or they're in the alternative to come back with you with an alternative since they can't put the original back up. I mean, frankly, if the original rotted one were still in their possession and they wanted to put it up, that they could do. It's not a contract, and if they didn't replace it, if they had the original available, not having the original available anymore, with this denial, they're going to have to come back, or the new owner would have to come back with a proposal, which, as we discussed, might well be a composite material, rather than something that's not as heavy as the original was, and therefore not as destructive or damaging to the roof, or perhaps an original in wood, whatever, but that information, they'd have to come back. So I think, I don't think you necessarily have to put a time frame on it. I know that was an interesting thing. I think since they're here before you and you've got jurisdiction of it now, it might be a good idea for all concerned to put some sort of time frame by which it either must be reinstalled, or the people must reappear before, the owner must reappear before the commission, so it doesn't drag out another decade. I do think that would be appropriate for the motion.
Andrew? You're muted, Andrew.
I agree with what Andy said. And, do we need to be clear in stating that as we reject this current alteration to the COA, that the 211 findings 2011 findings are still in place. And I'd like to state for the record that there is no ambiguity in those findings that's been presented to us today. I think the findings are clear in 2011, and our motion today reinforces those findings.
I think you're wise. I think we should include that in the motion.
So at this point, we would need Ms. Anderhagen to propose to amend her motion if she would like to incorporate a time period for restoring the balustrade. Mr. Gates would need to approve that amendment and resecond it. If you want to incorporate the decision from 2011 by reference, you're free to do that. I'm not sure you need to, because nothing that's happened tonight has altered any of the findings that were made at that time.
So I propose to amend my motion to incorporate a time frame for consideration of further study of the balustrade. And I would suggest
just study, or I think Attorney Teitz's recommendation was that we set a time frame to either restore the balustrade to the house or to submit an alternative proposal, one or the other. That way, if nothing happens,
okay.
You know that you need to move forward with some sort of enforcement.
I guess I would look to staff and council regarding what a reasonable period of time is. I would suggest 30 days, but I don't know whether that would be considered reasonable.
I think that's a little bit, if you were going, I think you have two choices. This is Andy Teitz, I'm sorry. If you want to just have a short time frame for which to respond essentially with a status report and a progress report of which way they're going. But I think if it's to either restore it or come back to the board with a proposal for, and when we say restore, that'd be replacing it in kind, as it was, the actual wood as it was. In the alternative, come back to the board for a replacement in a different material. I think that obviously would need more time. This is something that I'm looking would be applying to the other owner, and that would be more in the idea of months rather than days. I guess the question is which you want.
Richard, this is Matt Callahan. Is it appropriate for me to say anything at this point?
No, I think we want to get through with the correct motion, and we can have a discussion on it.
That's what I was going to refer. I'm going to direct my comments to the motion. It would seem to me that we're here this evening to try and get some resolution of this in an expeditious manner, if possible. The commission has obviously made the decision that the balustrade is an historically significant feature. So we're there. At this point, it's really a question, it seems to me, that my clients have to decide whether they want to try to replace that or come back before the commission and indicate with the demolition standards that it just cannot be done appropriately. And since we're here to do that, would it make more sense to just continue to another meeting to give them an opportunity to do that if they want to do it? And I know that there's a timetable. You've got to make a decision within 45 days of the time that the application was submitted, and we'd agree to an extension of that if it's appropriate.
Mr. Chair, I know we're allowing some leeway, but we do have a motion on the table. It's really not the appropriate time for comment. Ms. Anderhagen, maybe a two-prong approach is best, and maybe you propose a shorter period for making a decision on what they want to do and a longer period of time for actually completing what they want to do. So maybe, 30, 60, 90 days to make that decision, and, 6, 12, 18 months for completing the work. Just throwing some
Well,
random things out there.
It seems to me that 30 days is not unreasonable to make a decision. Does that run us into trouble with the time frame that we need to respond?
Yeah, we need to respond by the end of May, 28th of May or something like that.
So 30 days from now.
I mean, the applicants are maybe willing to have an extension, but I think that we just want to get this motion together and on the floor.
Well, I mean, you know, I offered, okay, well,
I would give it a longer period of time, frankly, for them to come back and make the decision. They'll probably come back sooner.
but a longer period of time than 30 days, so 90 days. I'm confused. I don't know what people want. I'm hearing all different things. I mean, it seems to me that they are in a position to make a decision about what direction they want to go in relatively quickly. Is that 2 weeks or 4 weeks? And then the time frame to complete the work, I would say, is a maximum of 6 months.
6 months, okay. 6
Maximum,
months to complete the
maximum.
work, and let's do 30 days then to make the decision on which way they're going. It does depend upon how quickly they can get, another contractor in to look at it, all of that stuff, if they're gonna come up with an alternative plan. We have to recognize that.
Well, if they're having trouble with, ascertaining, appropriate estimates, coming back to us and saying, here's what we've done so far, and can we have another 2 weeks? Doesn't seem unreasonable.
Right.
May we ask a question? May we ask a question?
No, there's a motion on the
I
table.
want to get the motion together first. Okay, the motion's on the table. It has a two-pronged time approach. Do we have a second for this motion?
I'll second the motion.
Linda seconds the motion. Right, now we can have discussion. All right. Catherine, do you want to say something?
So am I to understand that what the expectation is that we go and find a craftsman to give us a quote for what it would cost to replace the entire thing, which was not here when we bought the property, or the 3 sides that were here when we bought the property, or the front alone, which was mentioned, in either wood or another composite material, and that if we still cannot afford all of that work or any of that work, that we at that point of time have to somehow establish a hardship argument that we cannot afford to do all that, or that we are able to afford one of those alternatives and we are willing to do it.
Yep.
Is that what
Mr. Chair-
you want from us? Because I just need to know so I can act on it.
All right, let's ask Andy what his take is on that. Andy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I just want to clarify something, because I don't want you put words, you may have put words into people's mouths that aren't there. The idea of replacing only the front is something only you have suggested. There is no indication from the comments from the commission that replacing only the front balustrade will be acceptable. So I don't want you to go down that path. You can, but I don't want you to be misled and say, oh, you thought we could just do the front. So with the other options, I think that is the case. And I must tell you about the hardship. I mean, the whole thing here is the information about, you would really need to provide us with the information about the sale of the house and what your existing mortgage is and the proceeds of the house. That's what you're really getting into, because that's what we're treating it as. It's the sale of the house. And the standard for demolition is that there's no other way to save it, including that there wouldn't be other buyers out there who would be willing to pay the money and make these corrections. So I don't want you to think it's simply a matter of, as you've said many times before, you don't have the money based on your income to do it. That's not the financial hardship standard that applies. It would be that no one would come in and buy the house at a price, and maybe they would pay less than what you're asking. But that's not the same thing as a financial hardship. That's just less of a financial gain for you on the sale. So I think you need to realize that as far as your options. I think, as one of the commissioners has indicated, you're really best deal on this would be to negotiate this with the buyer, with some sort of either escrow or deduction in price, and let the buyer take on the responsibilities. And I think you're going to hear now from this and the other ones, you'll have a list of what the commission is or is not willing to allow, so that you can provide tonight's motions to the buyer, and he or she knows what they've got to do, and get the cost estimates, and they'll be pretty easy to have the contracting estimates. And if you want to come back for something specific, because I can see we've talked about, and I think there seems to be a sentiment to allow a composite material on the balustrade, but you could come back and get confirmation of that relatively quickly. And the same thing you're talking about, this new, the reproduction of the windows as well. I think that's something that you could probably get the approvals pretty quickly, and then pass that on to someone else to do within a reasonable period of time, but not keeping your sale delayed.
Was there a reason why we were asked to provide the side lights proposals? for this?
Mr. Chairman?
We need to get on with this motion. I know, Jamie, and I'm anxious about it too. We have a motion on the floor. We don't want to get into the sidelights at the moment. We want to vote on this motion and get on with this. We've been at this for an hour and a half.
Do we have a 7 o'clock cutoff?
That depends upon
No.
our staff.
I do not. That's on Thursday nights when we butt up against EDC.
Okay.
But we do need to move on. So I think I want to ask for, there are no changes to the motion. It stands as it is. Everybody's fine. Any more discussion on this? I think I want to vote. So we'll start with a roll call vote. We'll start with Andrew Martinez. You're on mute.
Yes, I'm in favor of the motion.
Shanti Anderhagen,
In favor.
Murray Gates,
Vote to approve
the motion.
the motion.
Linda Stedman,
In favor.
to approve. Okay, and Richard Youngkin, yes, I vote for the motion. So I think that takes care of the balustrade. We want to move on now to the sidelights. The sidelights have been, the applicants have an alternative plan for the sidelights already for us to look at, and they're willing to proceed with that alternative. Do we have any discussion about this alternative? Any questions about it? I'm not hearing any questions about it.
Mr. Chair, do you need to make your same determination as to character of the sidelights?
Yeah, I think we do. The sidelights, I don't think there's any question that the sidelights are an original feature of the house. There's been no discussion about those sidelights not being original. They match the transom, and they're part of the decorative enfrainment of the front door. So they're in a critical kind of aspect in the front facade. They're leaded glass lights. They're badly deteriorated, we understand. They have been removed and put in safe storage. And the 2011 CO of A approved their restoration. Now, nothing has happened with them except that they were removed from their location and temporary panels, plexiglass panels, were put in place as side light windows. So the question really is, I think before us is an alternative treatment to provide side lights in the windows, or something that looks like the original side lights. It's a to my mind, it's a reconstruction, kind of depending upon how much of the original material can be saved. And they're to be hung and not necessarily mounted as windows, but hung like glass decorative panels between an interior and exterior glass facing. If I got that straight, Catherine, if I described that properly?
More or less, but what is currently in place are 2 glass panels, not plexiglass.
Okay, so they're glass. Excuse me for that. So I think that ideally, from my perspective, the sidelights would be restored, and we're very close to that with these 2 proposals. The difference being that they're not taking up the entire window, the frame that they originally were in. So I have a question about that for Catherine.
They would be the same size as what was the original. They're the same size as the actual glass insert in the original wood frame. They would basically sit in front of that frame instead of being part of that frame.
Oh, so the question is, couldn't they not be installed within the frame itself where the old windows
that would
were?
mean deconstruction of everything that is on the interior. And it also puts the new homeowner in a situation where there is a significant amount of heat loss, because what is currently there is a much more heat retentive material that this, this decorative panel would then basically, it goes in the space that was created by the 2 that are currently there. It's actually a safer alternative. Also, if there was any damage, it could be easily removed and fixed. Whereas if it was permanently put in place, if there's damage, it cannot be. There's also safety issues that stained glass is relatively easy to break. And so if that was exposed stained glass on the exterior, it would be relatively easy for someone to gain access to the house by breaking that stained glass.
So I have no problem with the sort of storm window effect that these panels have on either side. But let's hear from Shanti. She has her hand
I'd
up.
like to know what type of glass has been installed in the window, the window frame that had the leaded glass.
It's a plain single pane glass.
Okay, so it's
clear glass. So
clear glass.
Clear glass. So what you would see if this panel were installed is you would see what you used to see. It's just that.
Well, it doesn't have the dimension at the exterior that the leaded cams, do have. And I'm confused about what the second. So are there 2 pieces of glass, and you're proposing to put this panel between them?
Yes, simply because the exterior storm that is screwed into the frame of the side light is on the exterior, and that is another safety measure, and it's also again a heat retentive measure.
So you're planning on putting this panel on the exterior of the house with the storm window over it?
Correct.
It's basically sandwiched between the 2.
Yeah. Okay.
There's a well that's about 1.5 inches deep that it's basically suspended from hooks at the top, and it works at the bottom. There would be stops, so there would be no movement. And then we would again we would replace the exterior storm window for safety of the decorative piece and also for heat retention.
So in effect, you're proposing to restore the panel but not reinstall it in the traditional way.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
So let me ask about the exterior appearance. Will there be, when I look at it from the outside, the exterior appearance, will I notice that it's hanging from 2 hooks in there, or will that be camouflaged?
Camouflaged
basically
by a stop at the top.
Yeah, interesting. All right, any other questions from the board? Hearing none. Brian, do you have a question?
Yeah, I just want to make clear that it's not my impression that what she's proposing for her alternative is going to be an accurate recreation of what's there in terms of dimensions or materials. I have stained glass pieces that have been created in my house, and it's not even remotely the same sort of construction, and therefore character defining feature that than what was there, which is still represented in the transom window. I think you would wind up with, some distinctly different elements in appearance. And you have an estimate, albeit one that's 10 years old at this point, as to what it would be to, I'm a little unclear on whether it's, rehabilitate the old windows or make replicas of the old windows available to you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes,
So
Shanti?
my question was specific to them, and they answered affirmatively that they are going to restore the these windows, but not reinstall them. And restore would be in-kind replacement of any deteriorated elements and preservation of any stable elements.
The only stable elements that both stained glass artists indicated are usable are potentially the medallions that are soldered on the exterior.
Okay, so then it's not a restoration. Then it is a reconstruction. I mean,
And
restoration.
that was the proposal back in 2011. It was going to be all new material. They were not going to be able to utilize anything beyond the medallions at that juncture either.
So the $3,000 estimate was for a reproduction, an in-kind reproduction, same materials.
Modern material, because I don't know, that's what was said to us. The rest of it is highly toxic and they don't use that material anymore. So.
Whoa, wait a minute.
Okay.
Yes, lead is toxic. You must inhale it or ingest it for it to have any effects. The toxic effects of lead come from working on it, machining it, putting it together. Just having it sitting in the window, elemental lead is completely inert. And I'm sorry, I've heard lots of representations about what a threat this is. I worked in the environmental industry for 15 years. Elemental lead does not volatilize. It does not dust. It's not paint. It is inert when left on its own.
But it does oxidize with powder with white powder on the exterior, and that's what we're dealing with that with the old materials. And just FYI, the transom window that is above the front door has also had work on it over the years, not work that we did on it, but there have been panes of glass that broke on that as well and were replaced. So that entire piece is not original either. There are two panels for which it appears to be the leading, but it's actually a solid piece of glass that's behind the metalwork. The metalwork is literally glued to that solid piece of glass. It's not completely original either.
So what we have now in the case of this enfrainment we have a mixture of old and new in the transom, and we have the option, two estimates for something that is like a reconstruction, but with new materials for the caning or the leaded work. And of course, it'll be new glass. In both of these cases, what happens to the original windows? What happens to them?
The original windows are still in storage in the basement of the home. So
Right.
In order to utilize some of the materials, the medallions in particular, they will have to be, transferred to the stained glass artist selected to do the work. They will have to break off the medallions that are currently there, evaluate if they're usable, replace them with modern lookalikes if they're not usable.
All right, so they have an option to create a modern look-alike medallion. Is that true?
Yes.
All right, so one of the thoughts I had, which I feel more comfortable with, is that we not condone touching the original glass sidelight windows, that they're kept in storage, and that you actually create a reconstructed window without damaging the originals. Those originals, we know that they're not intact, but they're kept in storage for a future owner to possibly restore down the road. And we do not lose that historical record. With this house, we've lost the balustrade. I don't want to lose any more historical fabric than we need to. And that's what our guidelines tell us, that we must be very careful about historical materials. So if we have an option here to actually recreate or reconstruct, I think it's a reproduction, really, isn't it, Shanti? Technically, it's a
Yes,
reproduction.
sorry. Yes, a reproduction. Yes, sorry.
Of these sidelights, and they give us a similar, if not the same, visual appearance. In other words, when they're reproduced in such a way that the width of the leading work is retained. In other words, it's the same width of leaded work, and that the dimensions of the glass, they've got the pattern to go with, are the same. So in a sense, it is a reproduction almost exact to what was there. And then, but it's of modern materials. And then I do believe you want to protect it as you would with a storm sash. The transom is protected from the inside, as I understand, but it's revealed on the outside. It's not protected on the outside. There's no glass panel over it.
There's a storm.
What? There's a storm over it on the
There's
outside.
A storm on the outside. There is a
Okay.
piece of plain clear glass on the inside wooden frame. And
All
this
right.
will be a third element that will be hanging, and it will take the original dimensions of the
So this would basically take the same form as that transom, only these would be reproduced elements. Okay, that
I'm unclear, Richard, when you talk about reproduction, which alternative are we talking about here? The $3,000 alternative from the 2011 that would basically recreate a new window to replace what was removed from the property, or the 2021 estimate for a $1,000 stained glass panel that would imitate the original window?
Right. I think what you're doing, Brian, is distinguishing between what was approved in 2011 and what the applicants have put before us tonight. So in terms of the, a motion to approve or deny, this is what's before us tonight in the CFA, is this reproduction alternative, new materials sandwiched between a storm sash on the outside and a glass panel on the inside. Has the same feel as the original, perhaps the same appearance as what it may have been when, in the last 2 decades, not original appearance, but appearance of the transom. It's the same kind of with a storm sash over it. I think that's what's before us. So we have the option of choosing that as an alternative and modifying the C of A, or sticking with the C of A, which was basically a restored set of sidelights that we don't have any indication in that there would be a storm panel on the outside or a glass panel on the inside. And that original C of A would have given us a window set into the frame as it was originally set in. So I think those are the options on the table. So is there any other discussion from the board?
Planning Director Rabbit has his hand up.
Yeah.
Jamie, do you want to say something?
Yeah, just in your decision or what you're contemplating tonight, if you were looking at the alternative, which was in essence a new pane that will be sandwiched between two as you described, I'm not sure the information that they submitted clearly articulates what the intended result is. And if you are, as a historic district commission, leaning that way, I would implore you that any motion should include the requirement that a shop drawing is submitted to the historic district commission prepared by the appropriate individual and reviewed by the Historic District Commission, including installation details, so that it's very clear what the replication is and it doesn't turn into a faux piece of stained glass draped on the backside of the window with any separation that will not replicate the initial intent and character of the original leaded stained glass, which one of the commission members mentioned does have depth and relief associated with it.
Right, right. I think that's a reasonable request to make, that somehow we have the ability to review this fabrication.
This is Andy Tights. I was waiting. I was going to suggest the same thing, that you require plan, although I don't know that you necessarily need to have the entire commission review it. That would be something perhaps you could delegate to staff or to a particular commission referee for it.
Right, correct. We can do that
Again,
in the
Andy, we
motion.
would be comfortable if staff did that in consultation, perhaps with the chairman, if the rest of the members are okay with that.
Right.
Sounds good.
All right, so we will include that hopefully in a motion if that's the way we go. Am I hearing a motion from anybody on the commission? Any questions before that, or do you want to go for a motion? Anybody?
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, also maybe a time limit, a timeline on this for completion of that submission of the shop drawing and completion of the work?
I think that we have the 1 year would be, if this is a new CFA, it's a 1 year standard. If we want to modify that and shorten it up, that's also a possibility.
That's up to you. I just want to make sure the applicants are aware of it, and perhaps you might have a sooner timeline on the drawing.
Correct. Yeah.
Because that's probably important to the new owner.
Correct.
Clarification that this is not a new application, right? This is a consideration of the standing application.
Well, we have an application before us to modify. So our this is just like the balustrade. This is a
right. But it doesn't mean it's a year, is what I'm saying. We can impose a different timeline.
Oh yes, yeah. So
I'll make a motion.
Shanti, okay.
I'll try to do better this time. So upon review of the application materials and in consideration of the testimony received during the public hearing on April 28th, 2021, the South Kingstown Historic District Commission hereby renders the following decision on the owner's application for a certificate of appropriateness to modify the provisions of the HDC April 6, 2011 C of A as follows. I would propose that we conditionally approve the creation of, let me back up, I can't read. So I think the motion is to approve a modification that allows the reproduction of the historic side lights using new materials and the installation method as described in the applicant's summary of proposed work, specifically that the reproduced element will be sandwiched, for lack of a better word, between the interior fixed glass and the exterior storm window. The details of the reproduced new side light windows will visually match those of the transom above the door.
Yeah. Andrew?
And that the original leaded glass is preserved and remains with the house.
Well, are those, I think that may be a condition of approval. Brian, would that be a condition of approval, or is that part of the motion to approve?
Either way.
Okay. Okay, so I'd amend my motion to require that the historic sidelights be maintained on the property and unaltered. Further, we would require shop drawings showing details including materials and installation technique to be reviewed by staff in conjunction with the chair of the HDC, and the timeline for submission of shop drawings. I would propose 3 months and completion of the work 6 months.
Second.
Second by Andrew. We'll have a roll call vote on this. First of all, we should have discussion. Any further discussion on this before we
Well,
have a
Rich,
roll call?
it didn't include findings of fact. Have we already done those? Have we already established that the sidelights are an original significant feature of the building?
Yeah. I think that should be in the findings of fact.
Okay.
I also think that we number 2 should be removed, I think, because it's not, we don't know how accurate that is, a little misleading, which is the construction date. The date of the federal part of the building is much later than this, and that's what's character
Yes.
defining.
Yes. So the findings of facts would be 1, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Conditions of approval. I would propose that those are as outlined in the staff report
And also in your motion.
and in my motion.
The standards deemed necessary by the HDC in consideration of the application have to do with the standards with porches and well, it's our standards having to do with using modern materials as well for replacement in kind, and the section on porches, which begins in
I think it would be
doors, entrances. Yeah,
Yeah.
41
Mhm.
And 43. Yes. Okay. And F is the submission of the shop drawings and the times of that you've already given. So I think we're all set. Is there any other discussion on this motion?
I'm sorry if it's appropriate. I still cannot locate on the town's website any of what you all are referring to in terms of staff notes. Could someone send me a link to where it's located? Because
It is all linked in. It is all linked in the agenda, and that was explained in the email you received with the agenda.
it's going to a page that won't open is what I'm encountering.
All right. Hold on a second. I'll just email them to you.
Okay.
All right, let's have a roll call vote then. Are we ready for that? We've got a second. We've had discussion. All right, Andrew Martinez, you're on. There you go.
I approve of the motion.
Murray Gates,
Approve.
Linda Stedman,
Approve.
Shanti Andrehagen,
Approve of the motion?
and Richard Youngkin. Yes, I approve. All right. So we've now dealt with the C of A number 1, and we need to move on to number 2, which has,
Point
yes,
of
Andrew?
order, Rich.
Yep.
Maybe Brian as well. How long do we expect this meeting to go? And if I have to drop off at a certain time, do we run the risk of not having a quorum?
I mean, Andy Tights can chime in on this. I believe once you open the meeting, you have a quorum to open the meeting, you're good to continue with the meeting?
No.
No?
You've got 7 members. How many members of the commission?
7.
All right. So, but you'll have,
We would still have 4 left.
you'll still have 4, so you're okay. So
Right.
the answer is the meeting could continue without you.
Okay, thank you.
Right. And we may have another hour. I'm not sure. It's possible.
So I can only go till 7:30.
Okay. Well, why don't you just continue until you can? I think
Okay.
that's the way to do it.
Thank you.
So we'll move on to item B, 5B, and it's 2545 Kingstown Road, Assessor's Plat 23-3, Lot 43. Discussion and possible action on application for C of A to approve existing on-site alterations performed without HDC authorization, including the replacement of porch lattice, installation of an HVAC equipment, and the closing of foundation openings. And then it does list here, Catherine, the application form, the application supplement, which you provided, the project review memo, which is another project review memo, and supporting documents. And in that supporting documents are photographs, etc. So those are available from the agenda page. You click on them. If you get the agenda page on your web, on your screen, you can click on those items and they'll pop up on your screen. So if you get to the agenda on your screen,
Yes, I
you'll be able to
understand.
get to
I heard you.
You
Yes.
got it? All right. So why don't we, you have your chance, I think, Catherine, to describe if we want to start with the lattice work, you can describe that. And I think we want to move along. So, whatever you want to say about that. I think it's possible that we could take these all at once. How does the commission feel about that? The lattice work, the HVAC cooling, and the cellar windows. So we'll let Catherine describe all 3 of them, and we'll have a motion to carry all 3 of them. Should we do it that way? Any objection to that? All right.
The lattice
So-
work that was in place was, we attempted to scrape it over the period of 5 years. It probably had about 40 coats of paint on it. It was not something that we could salvage. We kept losing more and more pieces of it with every single windstorm, and we replaced it. I believe that one of the major objections is the fact that the doorways are no longer contain, the passageway in the doorway no longer contains a Gothic arch. I provided you with information about the fact that while that's been there for a while, have no idea how long, the design is not wildly appropriate to a Federalist style house, nor to the porch addition that was added sometime around the turn of the 19th century. I did extensive research online and found no other examples of houses that actually had Gothic arches on these kinds of capped porch ends. My understanding was the bigger concern is that the lattice work remain on the cap of the porch end. And we did not find any contractors that were wildly willing to construct a Gothic arch. And the fact is we didn't really feel that it was wildly appropriate. And so, yes, we did make that judgment call. The intention is to paint it, but the work was only completed in September of last year. And there are elements of pressure treated lumber and that need to cure before painting. And so that is the reason why it is not painted. But the intentionality is that it can be painted and would be painted. It will not remain the natural wood color that it is currently. The HVAC systems involve 2 compressors. We were not under the impression that they qualified as something that was a permanent change to the property. Whether, that is a reasonable excuse in your eyes, I don't know. But we understand that the average life of a compressor for these systems is somewhere between 8 and 15 years, averaged at 12 and a half. We also felt that because the contractor who put them in, who installed them, went through the proper process to obtain the permits, that if there was any objection from the planning department in terms of historic districts, that would have been communicated to us, but it wasn't. So we are basically willing to, based on the guidelines here that mention the possibility of screening with either wood material or natural materials, we are basically asking to have you accept one or the other of the plans and we'll get them done. For the compressor that is of particular concern, which is located on the east lawn, adjacent to the exposed porch in the front. The reason for the placement there was simply that of the installing company indicated that the piping had to basically come down the side of the house. It is very similar to gutter piping, and that the compressor has to be located within a certain distance from the units. Had the units not been installed where they were installed, the piping would have had to go through roof. Once again, getting us into a situation where we're putting holes in roofs and compromising the integrity of roof structures. So we are willing to either build a wooden screen for that east lawn compressor, if you so choose, or to add some additional plantings. That is pretty commonplace in the village. There are about a half dozen other houses that have visible compressors in the village, and there are large plantings in front of them. So I'm hoping that I would prefer to actually go that route of adding natural screening. That was attempted last year. There are 3 plantings actually in front that over time would grow to be large enough, but if the decision is made not to wait, I can replace 2 of them with larger plantings immediately. And then the third piece was the windows. Again, there were 2 windows that were under the porch because the porch was an addition at some juncture around the turn of the 1900. There were 2 original windows that were in the basement. There were no window wells. There was dirt about halfway up the window. And those windows were rotting in at the time that we purchased the house, and it allowed basically for animals to enter the basement of the home. We made the decision to board them up pretty early on, but still had the issue of water and occasional rodents entering the home. And so we more recently replaced with cement blocks to plug the holes. There was no light that was being allowed into the basement as a result of those windows because they were very well hidden by the porch that is there.
All right. Now, do we have any questions from the board for Catherine? I'm not hearing any questions. All right, I have a couple of questions, Catherine. First of all, why, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but why did you not come to the commission for a C of A for these 3 items?
I was under the impression that we were able to, with the lattice work, we initially attempted to repair it. And then I was under the impression we were replacing it in kind by putting a wood screen. Honestly, I did not after doing my research about the design of the archways, and finding what I didn't find on the internet, which was any other examples except for our own property, having these types of archways. And we made that call. It was also during COVID. And it's been very frustrating to try to get anything to happen during COVID. But we were already throughout all of 2020 making preparations to sell this house and to try to find ways to improve certain things that we could improve on the limited budget that we have to make those improvements. So that was the reason, one of the contributing reasons why we did not come back to the commission.
All right.
The air conditioning units, like I said, I thought that if there was any question that when the permits were pulled by the company, that they would have, that something would have been said at that time, but nothing had been said. And it happened once in 2017, way prior to COVID. And then we put the second set in 2020, and it was the same exact process. So in neither of those years was anything said. And again, we were not under the impression that this is a fixed permanent change to the outside of the building. And we thought that those were the changes that needed to be made. Honestly, I didn't even think about coming to the Historic Commission on the rotted windows in the basement, because basically they couldn't be seen, and they weren't actually functioning windows. And it was, a danger again to the people who live in this house to have animals in the basement. So.
All right, so I think that the record is the minutes or whatever, it's going to show why Catherine did not come to the commission. And we're just assuming that she understood that she was in a historic district, and that commission certificates of appropriateness were required. So also a question for her, in terms of the cellar windows, I know we'll get to that in a minute, but just while you're there, are there any other windows in the cellar that provide light or air to the cellar?
There are a couple, yes.
All right, so you do have windows that you can get ventilation into the cellar,
yes,
air and whatnot. Okay. All right, so let's talk about the lattice and the openings. And Brian, do you have a question?
I do when we get to the HVAC equipment, but let's start with the lattice.
Yes, there is some additional information that I'll ask you to explain, Brian, when we get there. It's in your memo. I want to establish that the lattice work and the porch itself are character-defining features, and the arches of the porch. They're very interesting. They show up in the historical photographs we have that date from the late 19th century. Also the postcard view that Catherine gave us. They show up in all the photographs that we have of the balustrade, whether the balustrade is on the building or not. The porch, if it's shown, has this lattice work. So I think we were dealing with some very old lattice work and this old arch as character-defining features. Now, I know that there's been some research that Catherine has undertaken. I've done some. I'm an architectural historian, so I know a little bit about this. The porch that you have is an Italianate Gothic Revival picturesque porch that dates from probably the mid-19th century. There is a very similar porch at Kingstown in Newport on Bellevue Avenue, which dates from this period, has the same pendants. And we've talked about this before when you had the replacement of the roof on the porch. It has an OG roof, which is also very much a part of this period. The picturesque style does include arches for porches, arched brackets, arched columns, and with arches to support. There are several pattern books that were very popular, including Andrew Jackson Downing's The Architecture of Country Houses, Woodward's The Country House, Calvert Vaux's Villas and Cottages. These were widely popular throughout the Northeast. And you will see in those pattern books, these arches and these arched openings. So what we're seeing actually, what we had actually was a rare surviving porch arch with lattice work. The lattice work was diagonal in nature, not horizontal. There may have been doors to those arches at one time. I noticed that you have installed doors, lattice doors to your lattice work that you put in.
There was a
Catherine.
door on the front, but never on the side.
Right. So I think that in terms of this, it's unfortunate that you didn't come before us to receive a certificate of appropriateness. I think we would have told you that this was a very important feature, character defining feature. Do we have any discussion on the board in support of this or contrary to it? Hearing none, I think that, do you have something, Shanti?
Well, I mean, I just, again, as someone who studies New England buildings, as do you, I just want to second your description of not only the evolution of this particular building and this element from a later time period than original, which is not at all to diminish its significance. I agree with you that it is unfortunate that it is no longer, because there aren't any other examples like this in Kingston. And I think in particular on this building, it's important to recognize that this really is on some level a gateway property. It's at the intersection of 3 major roads within our historic district, a highly visible porch within the district.
Yes, so noted. So I think with that, I'd like to say that I'm not in favor of granting this certificate of appropriateness for the porch in its present form. I think it needs to be replicated. I know it was deteriorated. There was indication of that in photographs. But that diagonal lattice work and the arches should have been replicated in kind. It's not a complicated project. So that's where I'm headed on this. Do we have any other discussion on the board? Linda? You got your hand up, Linda?
Yeah, I just wanted to agree with both of you that it does appear in the old photographs, and it is a significant contribution to that corner with the archway. And I think it's a shame that it is now not there. And I think we should not approve that certificate of appropriateness for the lattice work.
Any other discussion on the board?
I agree.
So I think with that, you have a feeling we're going to wait till we do the motion, but let's put that aside and we'll continue to the next item, which is the HVAC system and the condenser unit. I think we're primarily concerned with the east lawn condenser unit itself. And Catherine has proposed screening of it. I think I'd like to hear from Catherine about the location of that condenser unit. I think you indicated that it could not be moved from its present location. Is that true?
Correct. It can only be, as I don't understand the engineering of it, but you have a letter from Woods Heating and Air Conditioning indicating that that was where the condenser unit had to be placed. It has to do with not only the proximity to the interior units, but the distance of piping. And it was not possible to put it on the other side of the stairs that are on that east porch because it was too far.
Can it be moved a few feet, or is it just really has to be
Because
where
there's
it is?
downspouting and then there's a cement pad that the stairs come down onto. It's not possible. We're in a position to screen it, which your guidelines say is a reasonable accommodation for modern equipment.
Correct. All right. Do we have any other discussion on the board? Shanti, do you have a question?
I feel pretty strongly about this one. And I would not be inclined, it's a highly intrusive addition to the district. It's not an acceptable location in my view. And I think were we to contemplate retaining it in this location, I would want to hear from other HVAC contractors that there isn't an alternative.
Are there any other comments from the board? Because I want to hear from Brian. All right, let's hear from Brian. There's a very interesting thing about this condenser and the unit itself. Apparently the town has not accepted this. Is that true? It has not done its final inspection? Hasn't?
That's what I've been informed by the building inspector, that nobody has ever called for the final completed installation inspections. Both air conditioners remain open permits in the building inspector's system because nobody has called for the final inspections. I don't know where that responsibility lies. I would assume it typically lies with the contractor once they complete the work to call the building inspector's office and get those final sign-offs. But right now, these are still open permits. I would also note that the letter provided by Woods Heating is interesting. It says that there was only, quote, one ideal location, but it doesn't explain why that was ideal, whether it was ideal for physical engineering requirements in terms of operating the HVAC system, or whether it was ideal because that's where the owner wanted it to go, or because it was where it would go in terms of the price that was quoted. I would also note that the letter from Woods Heating suggests that the location was approved by the building inspector's office. I've spoken with the building official, Jamie Gorman, and he has informed me that that is absolutely not the case, that there is no site plan requirement for HVAC installations. So they would not have known where it was going when the application came in. And that if a site plan had been submitted with it, he would have remembered it. It would have been that unusual a circumstance. Furthermore, since nobody's been out there for a post-installation inspection, you can't argue that it's been the location was approved after the fact.
We know that. Why would we
This
know
is all news to me.
Why would we know
because
that?
this is I simply went by what the contractor provided to us in terms of engineering, in terms of evidence.
This is Matt Callahan. Those comments are not accurate. Anytime that someone goes to put in air conditioning equipment, which is freestanding like that, it's always requested where it's going to be installed because it might be infringing upon setbacks or be too close to the adjacent property. I don't know if there are any records in the building official's office, but there's no question that the location of the system was requested and it was given and approved because, as I say, there could have been zoning violations if the building contractor put it in certain locations which would not have been approved.
Well, what's
This is
very
really, this is
interesting.
very much after the fact, Richard. Very much after the fact, and it's
I
not
realize
fair to the
that.
homeowner at all.
I realize that, but what is fair to us is that certificates of occupancy of appropriateness are required whether or not building permits are needed. So it doesn't really matter to us whether there was a building permit or not. The alterations took place, and therefore you're before us for a certificate of appropriateness. And we have issues with the location of this HVAC unit. And had we seen an application, we would have been able to tell you that. And that's the problem. So what other members of the commission, what do you have to say about this? No
Sorry,
comments.
although I think we're exploring different options here, including investigating the rationale for placement of the air conditioning unit. It probably makes sense for us to do things in parallel here. So if one of our options eventually has to be to look at using vegetation to shield the air conditioning, I think we should have a better understanding of what that vegetation would look like and what that shield would look like. Again, not committing to that as a solution, but if that does end up being an option, we should have a little bit better idea of what the vegetation design is going to be.
I provided a drawing. I'm not a graphic designer, but the plan would be to have 3 evergreens, arborvitae or some other comparable fast growing evergreen placed strategically in front of in kind of a triangle shape. I provided a drawing to the best of my abilities, and that they would immediately shield. The viability of all of them, I can't guarantee. It's going to depend on how well taken care of they are. But those are relatively resistant to drought, resistant to traffic pollution and things of that nature, kinds of plantings that would grow quickly and would basically shield. So we could put in one taller one on the corner, which is kind of what I suggested by the drawing, and then 2 additional ones that are a little bit shorter to just provide some visual interest. If you want 3 tall ones, I could put 3 tall ones in. I just don't think it's particularly visually interesting to do such a thing. But I do think that vegetation is a better alternative to a wooden screen.
Right. Do we have a motion on the floor? Or
Were we
do you
going
wanna
to
talk
wait
about this some
until we
more?
got through all of the different things?
Yeah, okay. So why don't we, I think in terms of this, why don't we don't have to tell what we're going to go, where we're going to go individually. We can just go on to the next one. And that's the cellar window enclosures. So I think I'd like to say up front that the cellar windows are not visible from the street, that there are other openings for ventilation of the cellar, as Catherine has described, and that it appears that the blocking up of the windows is likely to be reversible. Is that true, Catherine, that somebody in the future could remove these concrete blocks?
Easily.
Easily, okay. So I don't think much damage was done with this. Any other discussion? Any other thoughts or questions from the board? So I think hearing none, I think we are ready for a motion. I think you should include the lattice work and the HVAC and the window blocking up in the motion. Yes, Shanti?
Yeah, I just have a question. I'm happy to make the motion, but I do have a question about how we would handle this differences in terms of and how the commission is going to express differences in terms of the motion. If we have all 3 of these things in one motion and a commissioner wants to go one way and another commissioner wants to go another way, how are we handling that?
Well, that does sound like a distinct possibility. So perhaps we could, it doesn't seem to be a problem with the windows in the cellar. Is everybody agreed with that? Okay.
Well, why don't you take that one first, Richard?
Do you want?
Yes, okay. Why don't we have a motion about the cellar windows? Take care of it.
The motion I would make is that upon the review of the application materials and in consideration of the testimony during the public hearing on April 28th, 2021, the South Kingstown Historic District Commission hereby renders the following decision. on the owner's application for a certificate of appropriateness for after the fact approval of existing on-site alterations. Specifically, this motion is addressing the closure of foundation openings beneath the porch with concrete block. My motion is that it be conditionally approved as described in the conditions contained within the staff report. Materials reviewed contained within the staff report and the findings of fact contained within the staff report. In terms of conditions of approval, I would suggest that, no, I don't think we need a time period on this. It's already been done.
It's been done. All right, do we have a second for the motion?
I'll second the motion.
Any other discussion? Any questions, any discussion? All right, we'll have a roll call. Linda Stedman,
Approve.
Shanti Underhagen,
Approve.
Murray Gates,
Approve.
Richard Youngkin, approve. So we've dispensed with that. I think the next one is the HVAC units. Yes, Brian?
I just wanted to make sure, I think for the benefit of the record, as it pertains to the house overall, that you make sure you reference the HVAC unit on the western side of the house or the northwestern side of the house as well.
Yeah.
I know it's not visible from the street, but it is still an exterior alteration that should have come before the board. I reviewed it in my staff report. I'm not sure that there's any real problem with what happened, but in terms of the property record going forward, I think that you should render a decision on it.
Correct. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the HVAC location on the west side, which includes the condenser unit and the piping, the exterior piping, as well as that on the east side. And obviously this can be conditioned. Do I have a motion for that approval? A second. No, I don't even have a motion yet. Okay.
Well, didn't you just make a motion?
No, I'm not making a motion. I'm asking
so
for
moved.
one.
Can we discuss before, or do you?
We'll discuss it after you make, if you want to,
okay,
you want to change this motion at all or elaborate on it?
Well, there is no motion on the table right now.
Well,
So somebody needs to make one.
Yeah, Shanti so moved, but I think she has to elaborate on it.
I would amend it to approve the installation of compressor number 1 and its associated piping on the west side of the house only. I would do 2 motions for the HVAC.
Oh. So we have a motion on the floor to approve the western location and piping on the house. Do we have a second for that?
I'll second that.
Linda's going to second that. Do we have any discussion about that? All right, let's go ahead with the motion. It's a motion on the floor. We'll have a vote, roll call vote. Shanti Underhagen.
Approve.
Murray Gates.
Approve.
Linda Stedman.
Approve.
Richard Youngkin, approve. All right, we'll have another motion for the eastern condenser and its piping on the exterior of the house.
So moved.
Do you have any conditions on that? Shanti?
No, I don't have any conditions.
What is the motion that you were making, Shanti?
Well, I thought that Rich asked for a motion to approve the installation of compressor number 2 and its associated piping on the east and south sides of the house.
Okay.
Is that your motion, Rich?
It is.
And
I would like to condition that motion to say that that condenser on the eastern side of the house located off the steps and the porch needs to be properly screened with vegetation, not with lattice screening. I'm just putting that on the table. It has to be part of the motion, the condition, because Catherine has said she'd do it either way, but we need to be specific about which way. And we probably should be specific about the type of vegetation itself. It should be evergreen vegetation and probably low, not high, shrubs or not arborvitae that will grow tall. That's my opinion.
I would amend the motion to include what the chair just described in terms of evergreen vegetation that are shrubs, not trees, and that, you know, grow to a height above the existing condenser, but not more than, I would say, a foot.
And the screening should be on all appropriate sides that can be seen from the roads and the sidewalks.
Further amend my motion to include screening surrounding the unit.
Right. Okay. So do we have a second for this motion?
Second.
Marie seconds. So we'll have a roll call vote. Linda Stedman.
Approve.
Murray Gates.
Approve.
Shantia Underhagen.
Not approve.
And Rich Youngkin, approve. So
was the vote on that 3-1?
3-1.
Okay, so that is approved.
That is approved. All right. So now we'll move on to the last item. It's 8 o'clock. Let's get through with this as expeditiously as possible. We're talking about the lattice and the arches. I think we're ready for a motion on that as well. Do we have a motion?
I move that the applicant's request for a C of A, approving the existing replacement of the lattice work on the east porch, including the squared off entries, is denied. And the lattice shall be reconstructed to replicate the original lattice panels in accordance with the applicable standards and guidelines and conditions of approval and findings of fact contained in the staff report. And specifically, I would note conditions of approval F, that the new lattice panel shall be removed and the panel should be reconstructed to replicate the original panels. Made of lattice stock of the same dimensions as the original lattice, orientated at a 45-degree bias to the porch floor and roof posts, and constructed as a single lattice panel with a Gothic arch entryway on each side of the porch. The new lattice shall be primed and painted wood.
All right.
Do you want to put some time frames in there? And do you want to require a set of plans again for the materials before construction is started, construction drawings?
But amend my motion to include the requirement that drawings be submitted to the planning department staff and reviewed in conjunction with the HDC chair. And further, that the timeframe for this work, submission of drawings within 3 months and completion of work within 6.
Okay, we'll have a second for this.
I second it.
Linda seconds. We'll have discussion. I think the findings of fact we need to emphasize that this is a character defining feature. I know that's already in the record, but we need to emphasize that in the findings of fact. And again, number 2, the date is not appropriate for this. That's specified.
Do you want the motion amended or to reflect that, Rich?
I mean, you could amend the motion just to simply say that it's number 2 can be taken out and that it's the character defining feature. I also want to add that we have the specific guidelines that we want to cite for this.
42, 44, and 45.
Are those the porch guidelines?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, this is Andy Tights. Might I also suggest a specific finding to the effect that although the porch is not original to the construction of the building, it is one that has achieved significance as a later addition to the building, but it has achieved significance in its own right.
Yes, we can add that. That fits into the character defining feature. And we need to add with those guidelines number 3, which is the character defining feature standard, which is, I think it's.
I think that's in C1, section 1, standard 3.
Oh, it is? Okay. All right. Standards 3, 6 through 19. All right, got it.
I would amend the motion to include that the significance of this feature is its acquired significance, although not an original feature. It acquired significance in its a unique Gothic revival presentation in the Kingston Historic District.
So I think we got all that down. We're set for a vote. So we'll begin with Linda Stedman.
I approve the motion.
Okay, approve the motion to deny. Okay. Murray Gates.
Approve the motion.
Shanti Andrehagen.
Approve the motion to deny.
Richard Youngkin, yes, approve the motion to deny. So with that, I think we have finished the review of the C of A's 1 and 2, and we can move on the agenda. I hope that we will get these materials, Catherine, and we can proceed, in an orderly fashion.
Honestly, I'm going to need everything in writing because I can't follow half of what you were all referring to. I clicked on every single link provided in the agenda and I have no idea what you were all referring to.
Thank you.
So if I could please have this all in writing as soon as possible, because I don't really think I can act on any of it until I have it in writing.
Okay, we will do
A
that.
written decision will be put together.
And emailed or posted online somewhere, or how are we going to know?
No, you'll get a written copy signed by the chair of the board.
Will that be sent by mail, Brian? Or
I can
email?
send it however she likes. We have had success with email. I don't understand why you couldn't open any of the links that were provided. I tried them myself. They seem to work.
I'm
so.
clicking on them, but I'm not hearing any of the garbly-gook about what provisions are being found and decided
Okay.
against, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, did you get the staff reports that I emailed
No,
to you in the middle of the meeting?
I haven't been able to check my email because I have a screen that's about this big, and
Okay.
I've been trying to find whatever is attached to this agenda.
All right. Yeah, I will email and mail hard copies to everybody.
That would be great.
All right, very good.
Good.
Are there any other questions for the board that you might have?
Me?
Any of you? Yes. None? Okay.
After 3 hours.
Right.
Sorry.
All right. Thank you very much. And we have to move on. We have more items, but they're not very many. You're welcome to stay if you want. So we'll move on to number 6, which is correspondence and public comments. We have any?
I have none.
Any public comments? All right.
I don't believe we have anybody left. I think our one visitor bowed out a while ago.
Okay, and then is there an update from the staff on planning department activities? Anything happening that you want to update us on?
I can tell everybody that the Shepherd's Run redevelopment received preliminary plan approval last night from the planning board after a extremely detailed landscaping discussion from the applicants. They're truly going above and beyond in terms of the landscaping and their attempt to do a modern reinterpretation of the Ferrand gardens that were there. Unfortunately, the plans that were saved at Berkeley are not extremely detailed in the plantings that were used there. So they're going to do the best that they can from studying other works, other gardens that she created, while also substituting out some of the species that she used that are now considered invasive and replacing them with suitable native species.
Yeah, that all makes sense. That's very good.
So yes,
that's.
I think everybody at last night's meeting was very excited to move that project along.
All right, and did you have anything to say about the cemetery, or is that still under wraps, kind of?
Sure, I will. I know a number of the members were at the meeting last night where they discussed the cemetery on Curtis Corner Road with the subdivision that's going in. The net result of that discussion is that the builder seems to be thoroughly considerate of the ramifications of that discovery. He's agreed to rope off a 150-foot buffer around the suspected area of the cemetery and refrain from doing any work in that location until a more thorough investigation of the location can be done. Again, the information that we have confirms the existence of a cemetery, but it's sort of ambiguous as to whether or not any human remains are still there or whether they were relocated. So I know Jamie has been in touch with people from the state today. I don't know whether he has any more information to add.
Yeah, Brian, thank you. You did a good job summarizing the status of that. The one thing I would add is I did meet on site this morning with Rich Bourbonnais, the town engineer, as well as Alex Petrucci. And he did reference the fact that, again, he's developing a 150-foot safe zone or buffer area around the what is being described as the known location between the intersection of two stone walls. He also has retained the services of PAL to do an archaeological review of that site. And that group is one of the foremost leaders, not just in Rhode Island, but throughout New England with regards to archaeological recovery and reconnaissance.
Yeah, that's very good to hear, Jamie. Thank you so much for that. That's that'll make it work. Don't worry. Now it's in better hands.
Right. That's great.
It's good. So we're sort of on standby if the planning board needs us on that. You know, it's a comprehensive permit. It's not going to come to us. It's going to go to the planning board, but we're sort of on standby if they need us. And then let's moving on to the next item, which is May 6th. And I wondered if we could possibly postpone that. And we've had a rough time. It's been, I was counting up, we've met every month, now, and then we've had like 3 months or 3 meetings in a month. So this is more meetings than I think we've had in a whole year. So thank you all for hanging in there.
So I emailed Richard earlier today. I got a call this afternoon about somebody in the historic district interested in demolishing and replacing a shed. If that application comes in, we'll have 45 days to respond to it. I think my suggestion at this point, given the number of meetings we've had in the last couple of months, would be to cancel the May 6th meeting, wait for that application to come in, schedule a meeting for that, and then for anything else you wanted to do at the same time. Based on the comments from the gentleman I spoke to, I would anticipate that meeting popping up sometime in June.
Oh, okay.
Late May, yeah, probably June. Because he said he was going to need a couple of weeks to pull his stuff together. And he said that he was familiar with the Historic District Commission and had been before you before for other COAs. So we're dealing with somebody who has experience.
Right, and he'll follow the demolition section of our guidelines, I hope.
Right, I explained to him that, he couldn't demolish anything until he had HDC approval for the demolition as well as for the construction of the replacement item, so.
Okay. So Murray, I know that you had, we had discussed talking about these other issues at the May 6th meeting. Would you be okay if we delay it a little bit, or how do you feel about it?
I'm chomping at the bit, but I'll be patient and wait.
Well,
Yes,
it's been kind of rough.
I understand. So yes, I would be okay with that.
All
I
right.
did want to ask. We've talked about, I think, a workshop with the planning board, and I thought I saw something sent with a meeting invite, but that could have been me just hallucinating for a moment. Have we progressed with that workshop with the planning board, or is it just kind of a concept right now?
I think it's still a concept, although there may be an opportunity to have more of a discussion with them at some point when they get to a specific area in their agenda, either on the affordable housing kind of opportunities that can happen in Kingston, or on these other things that we've talked about, providing advisory opinions on. There are things in the comprehensive plan that I'd love to talk to them about that are action items actually in the comp plan, but they may be waiting for the town council to actually adopt the comp plan before we get to that point. And that's not happening for a little bit later. It won't happen probably until early June before the council adopts
Well, the comp plan at this point is out of the planning board. So, discussions relating to the new comprehensive plan have advanced beyond that. However, once that new comprehensive plan is adopted by the town council, and certainly meeting with the planning board to talk about implementation of the provisions of that new plan is something that not only the historic district, but we're going to have to be dealing with as a planning department all the way around.
Yeah, there's lots of nice stuff in there for us to work on, and including work with the Economic Development Commission. But I think that the first step might be, after it's adopted, to then set up a time in the planning board to think about these expectations and scheduling, and to work with them on it, and to get launched kind of into those other activities that are going to be meaningful.
I've seen Jamie muting and unmuting, so if he wants to comment.
Yeah, please, Jamie.
No, yeah. Mr. Youngkin, thank you. And Brian, thank you. Again, I was looking for an opportunity to say a few words. Brian did a great job covering the status and where we are, I'll just add probably 2, maybe 3 things to that. Town council, based on some public comments, has asked our department to host a listening session. We're in the process of developing that format. And in essence, what it would be is potentially hosted by the leadership of the planning board, town planning department, probably myself and Jay Parker, as well as Mr. Zarneski as the town manager, to just sit and listen maybe one more time to feedback from the community. There are some concerns about the terminology of a gateway entry on Route 1. The term is used as gateway, but if you read further into the plan, gateway is a broad term. They still have nomenclature associated with village scale, even though the term gateway is really referred to as the entry point to South Kingstown, but there are appropriate recommendations on design standards and scale and scope and density associated with the built form in all areas of the community, including that terminology of gateway, which is the northeastern portion of town as you come in from North Kingston on Route 1 into South Kingston. So I think we need to make some clarifications there, and that listening session gives us an opportunity to get some feedback from the community. The second aspect is in the budget process, the planning department did make a capital improvement program request, and I think I have $250,000 or $275,000, but not for next year, for the year after. And it's really a 3-year program to ask for study monies to undertake implementation of some of the recommendations in the comprehensive community plan. So, tried to look forward thinking. We'd like to tackle some things this year. We're looking to see if we can free up some financial aspects of our budget, because we have some savings and salaries. But again, those already may be earmarked for other budgetary requirements. So again, we're moving forward. And to Brian's point, I think as the council moves the comprehensive community plan through potential adoption, there is we'll say a cooling off period, because it still has to be approved by the state of Rhode Island Department of Planning. So there's another step. And during that step, I think we have an opportunity in a work session with the planning board to have a discussion about goals and objectives and policies as we move forward. So again, that funding on the capital improvement plan remained intact in the budget process that was approved Monday night by town council.
Good. We have that CLG funds, Jamie and Brian, that you would be able to tap into in the next round. That you missed the early 2021 deadline, whatever it was. But that's a matching kind of grant thing, and we have been able to do some really cool studies with that money. Get a few thousand. It could be up, I don't know, maybe up to 5,000. $10,000 project, you get 5,000 from the State Preservation Commission. It's a federal pass-through money because we're a CLG community. And I just one last note here is that there's a lot of really good stuff for us for the historic preservation components in the comp plan. Just hoping that they stay in there. That somebody doesn't come along and sabotage that. So hopefully you'll let us know, guys, if there's any need for us to come to a meeting and be proponents of those historic preservation pieces, those things that we want to do outside of the district that are very exciting for us.
And again, the listening session, we will have it's intended to be posted on our webpage with a news flash and potential press release. We can't control if the press prints it or does a story on it, but we will also make sure that all the boards and commissions or any list that we have gets an invite.
That would be great, because then we could be there in case something happens that we're not that we want to do, but we need to explain.
Yes. Thank you for your willingness to participate.
Good. Thanks. And so I think we're now ready for adjournment. Is there any other thing that we want to, I guess it's not on the agenda, so we probably can't talk about it, but anything else before we go?
I would just comment on how helpful the staff reports are, Brian, and also just how helpful your input has been, Andy, on this difficult agenda item. Thank you
Yes.
very much.
Second that.
You're welcome, and I agree too. I mean, Brian did all the hard work pulling all the stuff together.
Yeah, it's really helpful.
I'm glad it's over with. In a way.
It's not over with.
It's not over.
Anyway, let's not talk about it any further, okay?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All
I
right.
move that we adjourn.
Second.
Okay, and I'm happy I get next Thursday night off from you. I only, the way you had it, it lines up. It was going to be 5:30 to 7, and then the Bristol Historic District Commission is the first Thursday of the month at 7. So I have a series of, I have 4 historic double headers every year. If you keep your regular schedule.
Oh my goodness.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, everybody. Thanks.
Okay.
Good night.
Did you have
Thanks,
your
Rick.
formal motion to
Good night.
adjourn?
I moved it.
Yeah, I think it got seconded,
Did
didn't
you
it?
vote?
Yeah, I seconded it.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, aye.
Okay, now it's voted.
Thank you,
All
Rick.
ayes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Night, everybody.
Good night.
Night.
Good night,
Good night.
Brian. Thanks so much.